We're about 5 days into this venture right now, and there's a lot of coordination that's needed whenever you're planning a tiny treehouse, apparently. Had no idea, but basically we've got our structural engineer and we've got our civil engineer. They perform very specialized jobs that are related to each other and dependent on each other, but they can never be here at the same time. So we're actually gonna go and finally coordinate with them and meet at the same time and make sure that the designs that my treehouse designer's coming up with fits in conjunction with the site plan and the master planning that my civil's doing. So hopefully, good news today. All right, so Jake, our civil engineer, just arrived. Hey man, how's it going? We're going from putting pen to paper to putting foot on the ground. I don't know what we're doing today, but we're all gonna talk. We're all gonna chat about what's possible in this here creek and forest. So I love the idea if we could do kind of like a triangular, let's say, deck like that, and then there's like another one that sort of kind of overlaps it. And I don't know if the tree surveys would allow for something like this. And these are on different levels, but we've got dome at the bottom, dome at the top. Is that crazy? Could we do something like that?
Worked out some engineering last night, some concepts, and I think that it's definitely possible. So we're gonna have to evaluate some things.
Just like our budget.
Like the budget, like the soil
Yeah.
for these bigger foundations that are gonna go in for it.
Nice. Okay, cool. Well, I'm excited. You know, it's really funny because it feels like we've gone through at least 17 pivots on this tiny house village. First, it was going to be tiny houses, then it was going to be tiny A-frames, and then it was going to be tree houses, and now it's going to be a little bit of everything. We're actually going to have an A-frame tree house, but we're working on a new concept now that's completely different from all of that. I'm going to be talking about that a little bit more at the end of the video. We're going to have some sneak peeks throughout, but you're definitely going to want to stick around for the entire video. But I wanted to talk about why we've pivoted so much. Ultimately, y'all know that I love tiny houses. I love building tiny houses. That's something I'm very passionate about. But one of the rubs with building a tiny house is that it's a 12 to 14 month process. It can be even longer than that right now with everything that's going on in the construction market and the lack of materials and the rising cost of labor. And so because it's so time intensive to get a tiny house up and running, we're kind of going with this new crazy idea that I have, and we're really focusing on cash flow. So because I'm sinking so much cash into the village, I'm going to be parking my money down there for quite a bit of time, I decided to kickstart this tiny development with a project that we can permit semi-quickly, not super quickly because obviously we're having to work and coordinate with all the vendors, but quicker than a tiny house, something that we can build quickly and something that's going to have high cash flow. And when I say high cash flow, what I mean is that we're looking to charge anywhere from $300 to $600 a night for this first tiny tree house of sorts. Now it's going to depend on a few finish outs and the bells and whistles that we're going to add to it, but ultimately it's going to set the tone for the entire village. And honestly, I'm just so excited to get started. We moved here in January. It is now June 10th and we haven't broken ground yet. So honestly, anything that can kickstart the momentum, I'm 100% game for at this point. Also, I would love to start making money on this property, so let's go. Now, with all that said, one of the main things that's holding us back down there are setbacks and having to abide by them. Setbacks are basically how far from the front, from the back, or from the sides of your property that you can build. And because our building site is right smack dab in the middle of a creek and the road, we now have extra setbacks that we have to abide by. So we're still working through that, and that's why we had to call our civil engineer in to come in and help us solve these problems.
The rationale behind both of those setbacks, one is flooding, and if you're up off the ground, you can certainly diminish your flood potential. And then if you're off the ground, you also don't have a developed footprint on the ground like you do with a tiny home, which is part of the reason for the stream setback.
So we walked up and down, and walking back up with the camera in a rush. Oh God, I have to put on my seatbelt. It's my own property, bro. For the record, I do put on my seatbelt everywhere. But on my driveway, I mean, come on. Yeah, if I fall off this ravine over here, the seatbelt's not gonna help me. I accept death. Walking back up is always a challenge on, on my house because I live on a mountain. So we elected to drive this time. That's okay. I'm not ashamed. Neither should you be. So one thing you really have to account for, which is something we're, I think, realizing a little bit later in the game, is that people need a place to park. I mean, I always talk about where are people gonna pee and poop. The 3 P's I'm learning are the foundational elements of a tiny house village. Where are people gonna pee, poop, and park. So we're sort of mapping out different ideas here for how people are going to enter the glamp site tiny house village. So right now we're either thinking we're going to do a U-shape that goes around, or we're going to start very simple with a couple of parking pads back here that allows us to expand one by one and get creative with adding parking pads as we start adding different units. But honestly, what we may have to do is just kind of design a very general footprint of the parking situation out here, have it, put a note on the site plan that says verify on site, and then once we're approved and through planning and permitting, once the inspector actually comes out, walk the area with him, and kind of let them know that all of this is very fluid and has to adjust based on the actual foliage and nature here. Yeah, this is a bit more intense than one would think, but Daniel brought these handy dandy flags. And this is how we're gonna mark our spots here, just as a general footprint. Then we're gonna have our arborist come out. She's gonna tell us yes or no, you can't do any of this, or I don't care. Hopefully it's that one, but she's an arborist, so she's definitely gonna care, probably.
As long as the forest is happy, you know?
As long as the forest is happy, guys.
Gotta keep the forest happy.
Gotta keep the forest happy. I get it. I'm just trying to get everything organized right now. And one thing I didn't really anticipate was that building the tiny house and the tree house and the actual function and the process of building and construction is actually the easy part in regards to getting this thing done. The planning, the permitting, the setbacks, the engineering, all of that stuff is very costly from a monetary perspective, but it's more costly on a time perspective. And for me, the past couple of months, what I've realized the hard way a lot of the times is that time is so much more valuable than money. And it's just so frustrating because if there's more that I could do to push this along, I would do it. But I'm really just at the mercy of 10 different people who I'm waiting on, and they're all waiting on each other's answers. And this person won't answer this person. This person can't give me an answer until these 10 people all get in a room and answer each other. I just want to build a tiny house village. I shall call it Structural did bring up a good point. This is always why it's nice to have a creative engineer, is we could, face all of our different structures facing outward. So even though there's not necessarily a view, we can still face everything out towards the rock face and towards the creek, so that when you're actually hanging out on your balcony drinking coffee in the morning or at night, if you're like me, you can still hear the creek from your balcony and hang out and really just feel like you're immersed in nature without being faced this way and seeing all the parking and all the commotion, because obviously people are going to be in and out loading and doing all that kind of stuff. So I feel like it's going to actually not be too bad, especially if people never have to actually look this way other than coming down and going to the car to take stuff out. So we're working out the details. I think it's going to work. And quick aside here, I do have a branding idea. It's Playground, so Plaegru with umlaut ND, because this is basically what we're building is an adult playground.
I'll go ahead and conservatively start designing just so we got the concept. All right, so you've got
Explain it to me like I'm 5.
I'm yeah.
Explain it to me like I'm 3.
It's not that complicated. So we've got a pizza shaped upper deck coming up right here at 12 feet.
I'm honestly still very conflicted with myself as a builder, as a designer, as a developer, real estate investor, whatever you want to call me. I'm still figuring out what I want to be when I grow up. But whenever I got into tiny houses, I was really just building them for myself and having fun, and people liked them, and so I kept doing it. And now I have a little bit of an audience and a platform, and there's this pressure to succeed and build something that's super unique and one of a kind. And I know that you guys would support me no matter what I built, but it kind of lights this competitive fire in me against myself to top every project that I've ever done. I probably don't need to stress as hard as I do about creating the most insanely creative spaces. I don't know. It's the creative process I get. And a lot of you reach out via DM or email, or you leave me comments on YouTube and you say very nice things about how things that I have built have inspired you or have kickstarted you in your real estate journey to kind of, pursue your creative endeavors. And that's very meaningful for me, and that's very impactful for me. And honestly, that's why I do this. That's what drives me to be the perfectionist that I am. That's why I go to bed at 2 a.m. every night working on this stuff, because I know that ultimately what I build can have an impact both from my audience standpoint, but it's going to create memories for the people that are staying there. And I'm still working out how much I really need to beat myself up on all of these projects. And for now, it's super fun and it's super spontaneous because I'm always going 1,000 miles a minute in my mind. And spontaneity is exactly what drove me to the concept that we're working on down there, which I call the pizza slice. Let me just quickly walk you through the concept. So if you're familiar with shade sales or shade sales, Caleb? Let me know. A lot of the times people will get triangular shade sails and stagger them. And so they'll put one shade sail like that and another shade sail over. And so for some reason, whenever I was sitting down with my engineer and my business partner, I guess maybe I just wasn't paying attention because ADHD, and I was thinking about a shade sail project or something, and I was like, whoa, what if we could mimic that type of style in the trees? And so we had these 3 magnificent trees down at the bottom of the property that we were gonna use as structural support to our treehouse. And so I thought, well, what if we could build pizza slice shaped decks, 2 of them? So I drew a very professional sketch here to show you what I mean. So the main trees are basically like that, and that. And then these are all extra supports that we're gonna be putting into the ground. But as you can see, this is a triangular shaped deck. like a pizza slice, and then that's another triangular shaped deck. And I call it the pizza slice because it's both triangular, but we're also putting these geodomes right on top of it, sort of like this. Sort of like this. And again, this is not to scale to anything like that, but because we're gonna have these two circular structures on these triangular pieces, like a pepperoni on a pizza slice, whatever, we're not gonna call it that on Airbnb or anything. That's just our internal name for it, but that's the general idea for this first concept. And what makes it very cool to me is that it's not just cool shapes and juxtapositions of circles and triangles, but it's elevated. And so right now we're looking at 10 feet for that first deck, and then 16 feet for that next one with the spiral staircase on each side. And underneath both of those on the ground level, we're gonna enclose it with slatted wood and make very cool, naturey, outdoorsy, off-grid bathroom setups. So as I said, we've pivoted 100 times at this point, but this is it. There is no more pivoting from this concept. We are working on this right now as we speak with our treehouse designer, with our civil engineer. This is gonna be the first iteration, the first build in the Robuilt tiny house village, which still needs a name, so if you have any name ideas, drop them below. And as you can see, there are two different structures. And so when I say it's going to be $300 to $600, I hope you can start to understand why. Because honestly, each unit itself can go for $300 a piece. So that's $600 just for those two units. But we can also rent them together to accommodate twice as many people for a premium. So instead of renting it out for $300 and $300, we can now rent out that entire space for $800 because you're getting an awesome tree house, never before seen experience for 8 people. So let's just run some numbers there at where we're wanting to start, which is $300 a piece. So if we have 2 units that are rented separately, that's $600 a night, right? Times an 80% occupancy, we're looking at about, yeah, you can see that, $175,200 for that. Now granted, we do have expenses, but our expenses are going to be fairly minimal. Honestly, our biggest expense for this entire project once it's done is going to be the forest management, coming down and chopping down trees and getting out invasive plant species and maintaining the grounds and everything like that. So let's say we decided to just rent out both of those things as one unit at $800 a night. If we were to do that for 80% of the year, that would be $233,000. Now, I don't think we're going to be able to do that, but it is possible. I mean, I truly believe that unique experiences are the way of short-term rentals, Airbnb, VRBO, glamping hub, hip camp, you name it. Glamping is 100% the next big wave. I'm calling it right now. I'm placing a huge bet that glamping is the next biggest travel trend in the entire world. You heard it here first. Don't forget that. But really though, I am placing a majority of my money, my livelihood, my net worth into glamping because people are demanding something out of the box, something unique, something socially distant, something outside of the city, something that they've never done before, and they will pay a premium for it. So with that, we are still working on so much with this specific project, from the engineering, the waterproofing, from the site plan to the development of the entire village. So we actually just had a call with Daniel, our treehouse designer, and honestly, he killed it. And he laid out the first draft of what that tiny house village is gonna be. He started placing where our 3 safari tent tree houses are gonna be, our A-frame tree house, our fuselage tree houses that we'll get We'll get to that. We'll get to that in a few episodes down the road, and where the pizza slices are gonna go. In total, at the moment, we have 8 different units planned, and we're planning on charging anywhere from $200 to $300 for most of those structures. Or here's where it gets really cool. If we want to combine that all into one listing and allow someone to come and book the entire thing for like a wedding or a family reunion or whatever, then that would be closer to $2,000 to $2,500 a night. But just the base price for all of these is $1,900 a night if everything is booked. And so at an 80% occupancy, we would be looking at $554,800 just on that little development if we can maintain an 80% occupancy. Now, for all of you that are like, oh, 80%, you can't do 80%, what about seasonality? Okay, all right, let's do a 60% occupancy. At a 60% occupancy, $416,100. So conservatively speaking, we're looking at $416,000 all the way up to $554,000 if we complete that entire 8-unit development. Now, honestly, it's gonna cost us a lot of money to put that together, but here's the good news. It's more than likely gonna cost us less than $416,000 to do it. So from an ROI perspective, this tiny house village makes a lot of sense. Now, of course, I do plan on sharing the journey with you on YouTube, but I plan on going into excruciating detail on all of this stuff with everyone in the Robuilt Glamp Camp program. It's currently closed at the moment, but if you're interested in learning when it opens up again, sign up for my list down below. All right, that was a lot. Planning out a tiny house village is a lot. It's a lot of hard work, a little bit harder than I thought, but I'm down for the challenge. Thanks for watching today's episode of Robuilt. Don't forget to hit the like button, the subscribe button, and hit that little notification bell if you want to be notified of more tiny house village updates. And what else? Oh, yes, I am doing a webinar with EnviroCleanse, the very first sponsor of the Robuilt channel. I hold them very near and dear to my heart. The live webinar will be on June 25th at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, or Eastern Daylight Time, one of those. And we're going to be talking about ways to make your short-term rental listing stand out. And we're also going to be talking about some of the best practices for capitalizing on the short-term rental industry growth for 2021. So if you're interested in attending, I'm going to leave more information in the description down below. And with that, I'll catch you on the next episode of Robuilt. All right, see ya.